Hello, I'm Esther Gido-Ewart. It's Monday, December 13th. This is Africa 54.
As the Ethiopian military reclaims more territory, more stories of atrocities committed by Tigrayan forces emerge. A closer look at the devastating impact of climate change on Madagascar. And soccer legend Samuel Etto is elected president of the Cameroon Football Federation.
We begin in the Horn of Africa, where the Ethiopian military is reclaiming territory in its war with Tigrayan forces, and now locals are returning home to war-torn areas devastated by intensive fighting and what they say are atrocities committed by Tigrayan fighters. Clara Frank has more.
Scars of conflict dot the landscape of Ethiopia's Amhara. Tire tracks and the blasted remnants of a tank are signs of recent intense battles in which Ethiopian government soldiers have pushed back forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The town of Nefasmucha, another grim reminder of the recent bloodshed. Priest Merigeta Tsefa Derese says all those resting in the graves are civilians. Some were killed as they left church, shot by Tigrayan forces firing out of people's homes, he says. Others were deaf or physically disabled people who could not move. A report released on Friday by Human Rights Watch also accused Tigrayan forces of summarily executing dozens of civilians in two Amhara towns between August 31st and September 9th. The Tigrayan forces could not be reached for comment, but TPLF spokesman Getachew Reda has previously denied the targeting of civilians in areas under its control. Last month, a joint investigation by the United Nations and the state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission concluded that all sides had committed violations that may amount to war crimes. In June, Tigrayan fighters, having recaptured most of Tigray, entered the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions. They pushed south, so that by the end of November they were fighting near a town 118 miles from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Tables have turned. In recent weeks, towns reportedly recaptured by the federal military include Gashena, Dessie, Kombolcha, and the UNESCO World Heritage Site Lalibela. Amhara regional spokesperson Gizachew Mulune said the priority is, quote, to liberate ourselves, and that the Tigrayan forces would be pursued. We will not stop our offensive until we have eliminated them, he said. Eliminate, in essence, until they have become no more threat to our existence. Clara Frank, Washington.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday is urging citizens to get vaccinated against COVID-19 following his positive test for the virus on Sunday. It is believed that President Ramaphosa has received only a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The first group of regular South African citizens will qualify for booster shots at the end of December. In a Twitter message, Ramaphosa asked South Africans not to let their guard down as he recovers and to do everything they can in order to stay safe, beginning with vaccination. The presidency said Ramaphosa was showing only mild symptoms and was self-isolating in Cape Town after delegating his duties to Deputy President David Mabuza. In recent days, a nationwide outbreak in South Africa believed to be linked to the new Omicron variant of the coronavirus is infecting around 20,000 people per day. More than 1 million people in Madagascar are experiencing severe hunger and malnutrition following years of long drought caused by climate change. The United Nations calls the situation on the island nation catastrophic, while the UN Children's Fund says about 500,000 children under 5 are acutely malnourished. For more on the effects of climate change in Madagascar, I spoke via Skype to Mandipa Machacha, Amnesty International's economic, social and cultural rights researcher for the Southern Africa Regional Office, about what measures are being taken to tackle the effects of climate change quickly and effectively on Madagascar.
There's obviously been a lot, or enough, I suppose, action which has been taken in terms of trying to deal with the hunger, the fact that there's lack of resources, lack of water, and many UN agencies, WFP, UNFPA, the migration organization have been, in there trying to deal with the symptoms of the crisis. But I think in terms of climate change, which is what we call the disease, not a lot is being done right now, unfortunately.
Now, Mandipa, as a cultural rights researcher for the region, what concerns you most when it comes to children and nutrition?
Children are really bearing the brunt of it. And the UNICEF has actually said that, the climate crisis is a child's rights crisis. Not only do they suffer of, lack of food, there is a big drought that's been happening on. It is a drought that is consecutively happening for the 4th year now. And, children also have very, child-specific rights, such as the right to education. And many children have not been going to school in Madagascar because their parents really feel that they cannot send their children to school unfed. But also sometimes their parents feel like their children can go and make money or, do some sort of wage paying employment in order to subsidize because the families have lost so much income.
So you paint a very grim picture of the situation in Madagascar. How can the international community help?
We need to get the food and the water to people so that they can survive today and they can survive tomorrow. And then the medium-term needs are mitigation and adaptation. So we need, countries, wealthier countries which are in a position to be able to do so, to be able to finance Madagascar, and other countries in their position to be able to put in place structures which mitigate and which can adapt to the current climate crisis.
What are the immediate measures that COP26 that just ended put in place specifically for Madagascar to deal with the effects of climate change?
There weren't enough. The climate finance, which many countries committed to, which was supposed to be, I think, 100 billion by, I think, 2020 was not met. But there weren't that many commitments made directly in relation to what you call loss and damage, which is basically when, wealthier countries kind of compensate less wealthier countries for climate change destruction that has happened in their countries.
Talk to us a little bit about the needs of women, especially pregnant women, the kind of grim pictures we're seeing coming out of Madagascar. How are those women coping?
Unfortunately, this massive drought that has just hit Madagascar was also coupled with the COVID crisis. So things like child marriage become a little bit more common, or domestic servitude, where they basically, sell their daughters off. And then, this results in, sometimes pregnancies and, even women who fall pregnant and unfortunately will not be able to have the kind of services that they need. And so women will be the people who engage in very, very negative kind of coping mechanisms, such as eating less food, starving, basically, so that their children can eat. I think a lot of people think about climate change as something that's happening in the future. It's actually not. It's something that's affecting people right now, people who have contributed the least to it, and who are bearing the brunt of our own emissions. The situation that they're in is it's abominable.
Mandipa Machacha is Amnesty International's economic, social and cultural rights researcher for the Southern Africa region. Kenya marked 58 years of independence on Sunday, with President Uhuru Kenyatta leading the celebrations. Kenya gained its independence from Britain on December 12, 1963. Meanwhile, on Friday, veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga launched his fifth bid for Kenya's presidency, this time with the support of his former foe, President Kenyatta. Voters are due to go to the polls next August, but Kenyatta will not be on the ballot due to a constitutional term limit of 2 5-year terms. Odinga praised Kenyatta for initiating the dialogue that united them 4 years ago after a bitter dispute following the 2017 election. Odinga told tens of thousands of supporters gathered at Nairobi's main sports stadium that it takes a seasoned statesman to shake the hand of his rival.
I will listen to your calls, in our conventions, bring recognition to this congregation and the nation at large, and I will speak out the people's aspirations as I understand them under the rule of Moja, and have to give my 10-point vision for Kenya on this day of December 10th, 2021, I, Raila Amolo Odinga, having been faithful and committed to building a national democratic and progressive Kenya in our lifetime.
Deadly clashes followed the 2007 and 2017 votes, but Odinga made peace with Kenyatta in early 2018, effectively sidelining Kenyatta's deputy William Ruto, who has been vocal about his own presidential ambitions. The Chinese government is promoting its language and culture through Confucius Institute programs worldwide, including in Africa. Some educators say they are concerned about what they say is censorship in Chinese-funded programs. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi, Kenya.
Steve Wakoli has been working for 3 years to perfect his skills in Kung Fu, a popular martial art taught at the Kenyatta University Confucius Institute. He's also a teacher here, where hundreds of students are learning about Chinese culture and language at the institute named after Confucius, the ancient Chinese philosopher whose teachings are a cornerstone of life in East Asia. There are about 525 Chinese-funded Confucius Institute worldwide, including 54 in Africa, according to a 2019 U.S. Senate report by the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Jacob Ratemo is one of more than 500 students enrolled here. He says learning about Chinese language and culture will help him find better work, but he admits the institute's classes avoid subjects that are politically sensitive in China.
The advantage is, I think, especially when you're in university level, you can access such matters. I can go to VOA News on a regular basis and see what is going on in China, or I can go to Google and get that information. So yes, I can admit there are a few challenges when you ask those questions to the Chinese themselves.
According to the U.S. Senate report, Confucius Institute funding comes with strings that can compromise academic freedom. For example, the Chinese teachers sign contracts with Beijing pledging not to damage China's national interests. Confucius Institute's management turned down VOA's requests for comment. Teacher Steve Wakoli says the institute's syllabus does not allow much time for politically sensitive topics and debate. Analysts say the Confucius Institute suppressed discussions on topics like Taiwan and Hong Kong to protect their funding from the Chinese government.
There have been issues around whether or not the institute is being used to propound what would be seen as anti-democracy, anti-human rights. And those concerns are founded in terms of what is the official Chinese policy on Taiwan, on Hong Kong.
Educator Jonathan Wesaya told VOA that the institutes are doing injustice to students by limiting their learning and exposure to different ideas.
Yes, the opportunity comes in through the Confucius Institute, funded by China, that is okay. But can you get as an individual to talk about Taiwan, talk about Hong Kong, talk about Korea, talk about North Korea and South Korea and how they relate, and how the whole bigger picture fits into the geopolitics of today.
With so many signing up for classes at the Confucius Institute, education experts say it's critical that students find other avenues to learn about topics that China may consider politically sensitive. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
A memorial service was held for former South African President F.W. de Klerk on Sunday. Incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country's journey was not unlike the life of its last apartheid leader. David Doyle reports.
A state memorial service was held for South Africa's late President F.W. de Klerk on Sunday, 1 month after his death. De Klerk, the last president of the apartheid era, died at the age of 85 after battling cancer. At the Cape Town event, President Cyril Ramaphosa paid tribute.
In many ways, the journey of our nation was not unlike the path that the life of F.W. de Klerk followed. Born into white privilege, as well as power, raised in the ideology of racial superiority, committed to the defense of an abhorrent and inhuman system, F.W. de Klerk would come to play an important role in our democratic transition.
Also speaking at the event was de Klerk's widow, Alita.
I want to pay tribute to this man, the love of my life, who became perhaps, and listen to this, unlikely but a committed parent to a new country.
De Klerk is credited with supervising a peaceful transition from a white minority to a black majority government under Nelson Mandela. He shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Mandela in 1993. But many black South Africans suspect he was motivated by pragmatism, given that his government was internationally isolated and facing the prospect of a civil war.
Being the end of the day,
de Klerk was buried in a private ceremony last month. Giving a state funeral to a former apartheid ruler, even one who negotiated its end, could have provoked protests.
David Doyle of Reuters with that report. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a former Barcelona and Inter Milan striker is the new president of Cameroon's Football Federation. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa as we review Africa's most important stories and memorable moments of 2021. Was it a year to remember or one we would rather forget? We'll look at the stories that made headlines across the continent and the world in 2021. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
The two-day virtual summit for democracy hosted by President Joe Biden wrapped up on Friday. The U.S., Australia, Denmark, and Norway announced an export control program to monitor and restrict the spread of technologies used to violate human rights. The U.S. is also launching programs to support independent media and anti-corruption efforts and defend free and fair elections. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has more.
From robots patrolling behavior, facial recognition surveillance, to software that turns phones into spying devices. Such technology is often used by governments to target political opponents, activists, journalists, and minority groups.
We focused on the need to empower human rights defenders and make sure technology enables so much of our lives that is used to advance democracies, to lift people up, not to hold them down.
As the two-day virtual summit for democracy hosted by President Joe Biden wrapped up on Friday, the U.S., Australia, Denmark, and Norway announced an export control program to restrict the spread of technologies used to violate human rights.
We've seen the expanded misuse of spyware and other surveillance technology to monitor citizens far beyond what's needed to fight the virus. We've seen the rapid spread of disinformation and misinformation.
The U.S. also announced initiatives to empower human rights defenders, support free and fair elections, independent media, and anti-corruption efforts. Transparency International, a global civil society organization working in the fight against corruption, said the summit's initial outcomes are promising, but more needs to be done.
Other countries did not step up and commit to specific commitments the way the U.S. has. And so that is a concern. What are they actually going to come up with? They have a little bit more time. The U.S. government's giving them until January to come back with commitments.
Some say the $424 million in U.S. funds for these initiatives, still subject to congressional approval, barely meets the need to bolster democracy globally.
These are initiatives and monies that have been allocated already generally for democracy, for the rule of law and human rights. They get to repurpose them for a new announcement. But what we're not seeing here are really substantial sums that are being put on the table.
Democracy is also under attack by the global rise of populism, white supremacy, and extremism, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Polarization is undermining democratic institutions. Science and reason are under siege. All of this is eroding trust between people and democratic leaders and institutions.
An in-person summit is planned a year from now. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
A controversial vaccine mandate instituted by New York Mayor Bill de Blasio is being blocked until a December 14th hearing on whether the measure should go forward. If the judge rules in de Blasio's favor, the mandate will be the most far-reaching of its kind for private sector workers in the country. Nina Vishneva reports in this story, narrated by Anna Rice.
Music, souvenirs galore, large crowds. Manhattan is once again abuzz with the holiday spirit as New Yorkers and tourists enjoy the winter decorations and sales. Right alongside the trees and garlands, COVID testing tents, a sign of the time, if not the season.
We were here 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think so, but this is the first time back. Glad to be out and about.
It's great. It's been great, yes. We're vaccinated, we're boosted, we feel totally safe.
I always wear my mask, almost always. Right now I feel comfortable because I'm by myself, but of course right now we have to be super careful.
That's because of worries that COVID will not go away in the new year. To address that, a New York City vaccination mandate is to go into effect this month that will require everyone 5 years and older to show proof of vaccination to eat at restaurants, visit indoor entertainment centers, and attend sporting events. And starting December 27th, everyone aged 12 and older will have to present a vaccination card showing 2 vaccine shots administered or 1 for the 1-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Although 90% of New Yorkers have already gotten at least 1 dose of COVID vaccine, the number of COVID cases has risen by over 75% since November. In announcing the broader mandate, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said the rise of the Omicron variant is what prompted him to expand vaccine requirements.
Vaccination is the central weapon in this war against COVID. It's the one thing that has worked every single time across the board. On a strategic level, it's the reason New York City is back in so many ways.
A vaccine mandate unveiled earlier this year for public sector employees led to protests by municipal workers including police, firefighters, and teachers. The new rule unveiled by the mayor on December 6th will apply to all private sector workers in the city's estimated 184,000 businesses. And for some, it's an example of government overreach by de Blasio.
You know, I think that it's extreme. It seems to be ham-fisted and inelegant. And just it's one of a long line of sort of decisions that he has made that seems to be overkill.
But for others, it's all part of life in the Big Apple.
It has everybody a little nervous, a little on edge, but you know, what can we do? You know, we're trying our best, you know? Just be out here, be as careful as you can. I try to do, you know, my part as well, that's all.
Incoming New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who will take office on January 3rd, says he plans to assess mandatory vaccination mandates based on their effectiveness, latest scientific data, and doctors' recommendations. For Nina Vishneva in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Former Barcelona and Inter Milan striker Samuel Etto was elected president of Cameroon's Football Federation on Saturday following a high-profile campaign in which he promised to tackle corruption. Paul Ndiho has the details.
Cameroonian soccer legend Samuel Etto was elected president of the Cameroon Football Federation over the weekend, disposing the incumbent following a disputed campaign. The former Cameroon striker, who won the Champions League with Barcelona and Inter Milan, will take over an organization long tainted by infighting and mismanagement and allegations of corruption. The global governing body, FIFA, has intervened several times to end the bickering among FIFA futsal officials. Etto's high-profile campaign, which pledged to rid Cameroon's game of corruption, received widespread support from former teammates. His election comes a month before the West African country hosts the Africa Cup of Nations. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.